and welcome to another episode of our podcast we are calling Chatting with Slava the Jordanian. I'm your host, STJ. Our podcast is designed to have a space where immigrants, especially Arab immigrants, can come on to share their immigration story, their journey, their lessons. That way, we hopefully can inspire others that are attempting or planning to leave their home world and to embark on a new world for better resources, for better opportunities, and to improve their life for their families and their communities. Today, we have a very special guest, Dr. Ihab M. Abdelrehim. Dr. Ihab came to the United States at age 2 with his parents in 1970 and got his PhD in physical analytical chemistry at UC Davis and worked in the semiconductor industry in the United States and internationally for 20 years. By the time he exited that world, he was one of 50 plus scientists worldwide that specializes in his failure surface analysis. So, in 2016, he joined Greenwood Dental and he became the CEO of Greenwood Dental Group. And in 2024, he was the founder of the Greenwood Dental Franchise Group. So without further ado, I would like you guys to welcome our guest today, Dr. Ihab Muhammad Ahmad Abdelrehim. How are you, Ihab, today? Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Dr. Slava. I appreciate it. I'm doing well. I'm doing very well. Yeah, absolutely.
Very excited to dive a little bit into your intimate personal journey as a American Egyptian in the United States.
Yes.
Hopefully to get an insight of the challenges that you championed and the mindset that helped you really achieve the entrepreneurship that you have achieved.
Sure.
So let's start with just introducing your background, your family, your...
Sure. Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to introduce kind of when we came to the United States originally. We came here in 1970, right around Thanksgiving. I was about 2 years old. My parents left Egypt for a better life for me specifically. I think that's kind of was the main reason. Well, at least that's what they told me. And they said that coming here will give me better opportunity for education, for jobs, things like that. And kind of that's the crux of it. And that's kind of what really motivated them to come to the United States. So we arrived here in 1970 and my parents moved into like a one room, like apartment almost. It's like a studio, I guess you'd call it, above in this house. And we were there for a certain number of months. And my dad worked as a security guard for about 6-8 months, maybe a year. And my mom worked as a seamstress in the fashion industry on Fifth Avenue or in New York City. And from there, we kind of moved around a little bit and we kind of settled in Jersey City in the end in an apartment on Kennedy Boulevard. And that's where most of my young life, where I grew up basically. So up until 8th grade, we lived on that, in that apartment. And after that, when I graduated 8th grade, we had bought a house in an area in New Jersey called Old Bridge. We moved there and I did my 4 years of high school there. It was really nice. Very different worlds. I can go into that a little bit later if Dr. Slava wants me to, but Jersey City and Old Bridge are very different in the way they interacted with me as a person, as an immigrant, and how I was seen or perceived by my friends. And then from there, once I graduated high school, I applied to various colleges, and one of the colleges I applied to was Case Western, and the other one was Rutgers. And Rutgers was about 30 minutes from my home, and my mom really wanted me to go to Rutgers, and I really wanted to be on my own. So I really pushed to go to Case Western in Cleveland, and that's kind of where I started my college career. So in Case Western, I went in there as a pre-med. I was going to be an MD. One of my dad's dreams is for me to become a medical doctor. So once I started seeing that I didn't want to become a doctor from just different experiences. And I even joined a fraternity. And several of my fraternity brothers were, moving in the same track, and they actually became MDs. So I ended up deciding that I was going to get my chemistry degree, which is what I was getting anyway. And I had done all my pre-med requirements, and I got a bachelor's in chemistry and decided to go get a PhD. So after getting that PhD, and my dad was like, you should become an MD. It's better. Nobody controls your life, which is probably true. As an MD, you kind of own your own business almost. But in the end, you're still kind of working for insurance companies. But in any case, I ended up getting my PhD in chemistry and then moving on to Rutgers to get my I did my postdoctoral fellowship at Rutgers with Professor Ted Mady, an excellent surface scientist, maybe the top 10 surface scientists in the world. And he was an inspiration to me and a great mentor. And that really kind of was my scientific mentor in the end, and including Don Land, who was my graduate advisor as well. During my stay at UC Davis. So after my postdoctoral fellowship, I started working at a company called Evans East. And there I started doing something called SIMS, which I'd never seen before. All my PhD and my postdoctoral fellowship was working on looking at different chemical reactions on metal surfaces. And now I'm doing analysis on silicon with a SIMS machine, which I'd never seen, never touched. And I worked my way through the company and became an expert in secondary iron mass spec, which is SIMS, and probably one of the leading people around the world, scientists working with the SIMS instrument and analyzing silicon samples. So once after 20 years, of a semiconductor industry experience and working in various roles at the company, Dr. Slava asked me to come on board to help kind of grow Greenwood Dental, which opened in 2013. And I said, sure, why not? So I left my role at Cerium Labs. That was kind of at the end, and I joined Dr. Slava at Greenwood Dental, and I've been there 9 years now. And saw the company grow from one office to 3 offices. And it was just last year, we just added the franchise. So, that's where my journey is at this moment, working on the franchise and simultaneously working at the Greenwood Dental Partners offices.
Yeah, and here we are. That is fascinating journey. It's funny when you summarize it, it's overwhelmingly impressive.
Yeah.
Because, you go through life and you just get it done, get on it.
Yeah.
Summarize it and you stack it that way.
Yeah.
Like how?
Yes.
It brings us to my next question to you, just for our listeners, especially the young entrepreneurs that they have a vision, they're leading, they're mentoring in their own professions. What was the mindset, or when did you realize you have a system, a belief system that fueled that drive to get your PhD, get into the semiconductor? Also, you did build clean rooms too, so you have an experience with that. And also, you owned at some point your own laboratory that
Avogadro, yes,
that was bought off. So they are in the crevices. They're extra stuff that you have done. And if you can share with our listeners, like I said, the mindset of Dr. Ihab Abdelrehim, and whether you have built a belief system when you were younger, when you were undergrad, or the belief system that this is exactly what I want, this is my vision. Did it start in graduate school, or when you landed, or when you got integrated into the semiconductor industry, which is something that you've never done before, nor it actually applied, right, to your degree? Your degree had nothing to do with
it. No.
Okay. So if you can share that with us, that'd be great.
So the belief systems and how kind of I moved through life, I would say started when I was young in Jersey City. I watched my parents kind of work really hard. I think, my dad worked once he was initially he was the security guard, and then he started a job with it's now called New Jersey Transit, but originally it was called Lackawanna. So, and went through Conrail, went through different various spots and different ownerships. But in any case, he worked for the railroad basically. And he ended, and I watched him work overtime, and I think he worked 60-hour weeks probably at least, and worked weekends sometimes, and holidays. And it was just to kind of keep us going financially and keep kind of a roof over our heads. And it was very interesting to watch. And my dad never graduated high school, and I heard the story many, many times from him and my mom. She would tell me that he didn't finish because he failed geography. So, and he had A's and B's and everything else, and he failed geography. And the funny thing is, and back then in Egypt, if you fail one class, you fail the entire year, which is kind of counterintuitive. You'd think that, okay, just repeat geography again. But he said, well, I'm not going back to school in the beginning of the summer once he finished. And then I believe at the end of summer, they said, okay, if you come back and take the geography test again or retest, and you pass, we'll pass you for your previous year. He said, absolutely not. This is a system that doesn't make any sense to me, so I'm not going back to school. And what happened with my dad then, my grandfather, his father, told him, well, then you got to go to work. You're not going to sit at home, do nothing. So my dad ended up kind of working various jobs and ended up in Cairo. And then that's where he met my mom, and then they came to the United States. So again, watching my parents, how they interacted with me with regards to schooling was very, very big actually. And that story of my dad stuck in my head. And I said to myself, I think I really need to pay attention and really work on schooling. And in Jersey City, you live in an apartment building, and it's not a safe area around where kind of where we lived. Our building was safe, but kind of leaving that Kennedy Boulevard area going out, it's becomes unsafe. But so I really had no friends per se that I can go visit like I did when I moved to Old Bridge. So I go from school to home, do my homework. And I'd watch some TV with my mom, and we talk, because she was a stay-at-home mom since I was in kindergarten. And so she worked for several years before that. And then she ended up staying at home while my dad worked. So they don't have to have any kind of daycare. So she did her best with helping me with schooling, which was kind of cool. And my dad, I'll never forget it. He worked because he started on the railroad. He gets the worst shift when you first start. So he was the night shift, and he would come back in the morning before I left for school, and he would go through the multiplication table with me, which I hated. I hated the multiplication table. And it was all memorization. And it's funny, everybody uses multiplication, addition, and subtraction now. And it's just like the back of your hand. But when you're a child, it's like, oh my God, you got a table in front, you got to go through it. You're making mistakes 2 times 4. And my dad's going through it with me. The 1 times table was the easiest. The 2 times table was fine. And then you get up higher numbers and it becomes a lot more difficult. So I was having a lot of difficulty with that, and he just kept on testing me every morning. I'll never forget it. And then it's funny, all that kind of culminated to me being really good at math in the end. But anyway, so, my mom and my dad had a certain level of skill sets, right? In math and science and English, obviously. And, once I got to a certain point in my life in grade, I was kind of beyond what they can actually help me with. So I had to end up helping myself because we had no money for tutors. So I would have to study on my own. And again, remember, like I said, I had to go from school to home. So I had no friends that I could work with. At their house or at their home. So I ended up on my own doing these kinds of things on my own, math and science and English and history. So that was very difficult for me, but I got through it. And that was, I think, one of the things that really helped me elevate myself. And the other parts of my value system and is that we knew various families in New Jersey, in Jersey City specifically. And there were a group of Palestinian families we knew and a group of Egyptian families that we knew. And we would visit these families, or they would visit us. And they had some of the families had kids that were my age, close, or pretty much the same age. So I used to enjoy that interaction when those families came over or we went over their house. It wasn't fun when you went over somebody's house and they had a little toddler and you're you're 8, 9 years old. So there's nothing for you to do there. And those instances, and even when I was there with kids my age, my dad would have me come and sit with the men, because the men would always separate from the women. So the women would sit separately and the men would sit separately here in different rooms. And so the women could relax and kind of have their conversations amongst each other. And you have the women had the head coverings. And what would happen is if they're alone, they can relax and take the head covering off amongst other women, which was nice. And so I'll never forget. There was a couple times my dad sent me from the men's area to grab my mom. We're going to leave or tell her something, and I'd knock on the door and walk in, and I could see the women starting to cover their heads like this. And quickly before I got in, and I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." My mom's like, "Just come in. Don't worry. You're young. It's okay." So she'd be like, "Yeah, it's fine." So it was a very interesting kind of upbringing where I was American in school and Arab at home, meaning that all my interaction up until 8th grade, other than in school with friends that I made there that I never ever interacted with outside of school, I got all that kind of the value system, the culture, just everything from my family and the families we would visit or they visit us. It was really nice, and I think that kept me grounded in our culture. If my dad had only American friends, for instance, I would never have stayed grounded in the Egyptian or Arab culture, like I did with them at that time. So it was a great experience, and I think that was part of what added to my value system and how I thought about life. And it was a really, I would say, unique experience for me as a person. And then we moved to Old Bridge, and everything flipped. Um, we didn't see our friends anymore in Jersey City. Every once in a while we would visit, but not as often as we used to. So, maybe we'd see our friends once every few months, and versus we'd see them maybe once a week when we lived in Jersey City. Because Old Bridge was about 45 minutes outside of Jersey City. So at that point, again, my dad is still working. My mom is taking care of me and home and everything like that. And so I got to know some of the neighbors in the down the street. So one of my neighbors was Rick and Keith and Thada and Hani. They were actually Egyptian as well, which they lived next door to me. And Keith and Rick lived across the street. But it was really neat because now I'm more in this American atmosphere and not in the Arab atmosphere, except when I'm home with my parents. So now it's very much. It's very different. It's more like I'm spending a lot more time with my friend Keith and Rick, for instance, or my friends. And my dad was still very strict, and he's always been strict about me being home in Jersey City, that I couldn't go out. But when we moved to Old Bridge, he kind of loosened up a little bit, but said you need to be home by 9 or 8 o'clock at night. You cannot stay out late. So that's kind of what happened, and that that went on for 4 years. And then once I went to college, and I came back for the first break, I think it was Christmas break. So I was going out, and I was going to go out with Rick and Keith, and I was like, "Oh, Dad, I'm going to go out with Keith and Rick." And what time do you want me to be home? He goes, "It's up to you. You can come home anytime you want." So I was like, I was expecting to say, "You got to be home at 9 o'clock," and I was like, "No," So I ended up going out and staying out as long as I wanted. But I still kind of, in my mind, I still had this clock going that, you know what, I gotta be home by 9 or 10. And I still, in the beginning of that break, I still came home earlier. And as the years went on, I stayed out later and later. And again, my dad never questioned me in any way. The only person that questioned me had to be funny, and it was really funny. It was my mom. She was like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm just going out with my friends." She's like, "Oh, I'm going to make dinner and stuff like that." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. I'll come back and eat later." She's like, "No, you should come back." I'm like, "Well, I'll eat a little bit later." But sometimes I would stay and eat with them. So we can kind of eat as a family. But when I got to college, it was, again, even further away from the Arab culture. And what brought me back to that Arab culture, I believe, again, in college, were the Arab friends I made there, which I thought was really nice. And obviously, your brother's one of my best friends, Slava, and I met you as well, and your and Ferris, your older brother. So it was really nice getting back into that Arab community feel, So. That's kind of where I built a lot of my moral compass, I would say, and how I kind of made it through my life, and kind of the mindset I had, and how I want to, how I want to get through college and through graduate school. And I never thought beyond college when I was in college too much until the last year. And then when I got to my last year, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go to med school. Let me continue on to get a PhD in chemistry, because I really liked chemistry. And the reason why I liked chemistry was a high school teacher I had in Old Bridge, Mr. Davis. He was amazing. So that's really what made me go into chemistry. It was funny. I think it was my sophomore year. I had first chemistry class with him, and it was amazing. So from then on, I was just like, I loved chemistry. It was like it was in my blood almost. It was weird. All the other sciences were good, biology, things like that, biochemistry, but this was something that I can really relate to. And I don't know why I could relate to it. It just clicked in my head. So that's kind of where I kind of brought me and how I thought about college and graduate school. And, but yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So let's back up a little bit. So your dad had the ability to decipher math in English, right? He had no problem, or yes.
Yes. Yeah. He was unbelievable in math. Like, he can do addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, even long division. He did it by hand. And what was really cool back in the day, back when, you're, in my youth, calculators weren't really a thing that you had in your home. I believe people had calculators, but more like they had the scientific calculators, engineers, maybe scientists had them, but, it's a grade school student. I had no calculator. So everything was by hand. And my dad, well, obviously back in Egypt, he learned math that way, all by hand. So he was very good at it. He can do all the stuff in his head. It was really, really neat. My mom could as well. It wasn't that she couldn't do math, but my dad is the one that was the one interacting with me. But yeah, so that's.
See, Dad was naturally mathematical because if I remember correctly, when he left El Mansoura to get a job in Cairo, he was a bookkeeper.
Yes.
Into accounting too. So yes. I lived with him. He is a first guy, and you're an apple tree. The apple tree. Yeah. You're such a number person. You cannot trust me with numbers for the life of me. Now, as your father worked nights, you had to do homework, and I know you shared this with me. Now, your mom's education, not beyond high school, was more French. So your mom is her second language was French, and then third language was a little bit English. How did she manage?
It's funny. It's funny. I used to watch her, and she took. So this is really, really neat. I believe my dad had a decent understanding of English when we got here. So he might have taken some English classes in Egypt when he was in school.
He dealt with the English a lot in.
Yeah. So his English was good. But again, my mom's French was better, right? And she went to a French school. So I don't believe, and I'll tell you why I don't believe this. I don't believe she had exposure to English in Egypt. What happened is when she came here, we used to have a college which was like a couple of blocks from us, and it was called St. Peter's College. And she used to go take like night classes for English. And so that English she learned, that little bit of English she learned, she utilized it to translate whatever it might have been from English. So she had to translate what she was looking at. Let's say it was math. Let's say it's a word problem in math. She had to translate the word problem in English to Arabic so she can figure out how to solve it. And she'd have to kind of translate it back to me. And she's telling me this word problem in Arabic, and she's reading it to me, and she's like, this is kind of what it says, and I'm reading it in English. So I'm like, oh, okay, so I get it now. Okay, so that's kind of, but it was funny watching her, like how she translated things back and forth, and she would even mix, French in there, and it would be, and I didn't know French, so if she started talking to me in French, I didn't understand what she was saying. So, but yeah, that was an experience. That was an experience, and I learned quickly how to do these word problems on my own, because it would take a long time to go through these word problems with my mom, because again, she's translating back and forth. So, but it ended up that
you have siblings. You're the only child.
Yeah.
You didn't have an older sibling that can hold your hand and
no.
Yeah, so you were it. So it's fascinating if we can discover the tools that you have used. If you can remember, I'm not sure if it's a blur. At what point you start to figure out science on your own. And I know that from knowing you, I know you have the innate, you are wired for chemistry. I believe that 100%. I've been married to you for 32 years. I saw you go through graduate school. I saw your lectures, presentations. I have sat through numerous discussions with other scientists. You are wired for chemistry for sure. I think that's the way you were born. But when you broke beyond the need for your parents to help you with your homework, and broke away from that and become independently self-sufficient, what is it? Do you believe that's because you have the natural ability to solve problems? And it's funny, you just said it's the teacher that inspired you to stick to chemistry was Davis.
Mr. Davis, yeah.
And you went to UC Davis.
Yeah, it was very weird. Yeah, I agree.
So at one point, do you remember at one point that was like, oh my God, I can do this on my own?
So I would say, for sure, high school. Without a doubt, I was doing everything on my own at that point. If I remember correctly, I'd say starting around 6th grade, I was able to kind of do these things on my own. And again, it's not like it was a switch. 6th grade and 7th grade, I got a little better. And then 8th grade. Then by high school, I was just purely on my own. I would, it was funny. Like you said, the people had older siblings, right? So in high school, for instance, I, study for math or study for chemistry test or whatever it might be. I just would study on my own because the friends that I had that I could have studied with, just weren't into the math and science that like I was. So I was just doing that on my own. And I didn't have the older siblings. Again, like some of the people I knew in high school, they had older siblings where, they could help them with, the chemistry class and things like that. And it ended up, well, I'm going to put chemistry aside for a second, but the math and things like that, I had to do really kind of on my own. But like you said, chemistry is a thing that once I started in that class, it clicked and it was weird. I don't even know how to explain it. I could look as I look back now, and look back at some of some chemistry books from when I was younger, or if somebody asked me a chemistry question, somebody who's young, who's a kid of a child or a son or a daughter of a family friend, and they ask me a question, I can look at them. I can actually look at the chemistry book and think back and figure the problem out, even though I hadn't seen it for such a long time. And it's just that chemistry for me, I don't know, it just works. That's basically it.
Chemistry is your intellectual language, I believe.
Yes.
And I test you all the time. We'll be just randomly watching the show, and I said, "Hey, Ihab, what's this?" Yeah. Like, I'm like, okay, he's still there.
I can't remember. We just had a conversation the other day, and I don't remember what it was. It was about something, and I went down a rabbit hole it was about the show Landman we were watching. And we were talking about how people think that, that alternative energy is where we're going to be in the next couple of years. And that's untrue. And Landman really kind of hit it. And hit all the high points of it. And it's like, well, you can't drive cars. You can't, without tires. That's made with oil. Plastics in the cars are made with oil. Toothbrushes are made with oil. I can go on and on and on about everything made with oil, that you cannot get rid of this industry overnight. Even though, it's funny that, people on TV, the government, so you have a liberal side of thinking about it. It's like, well, we're going to change everything over to solar and wind farms. And it's like, no, it's not going to work like that. To make the solar panels or to create these wind farms, actually need energy to make them, and the energy you're using is oil, and it's an immense amount of oil to make a lot of these things. So, and then you use a lot of energy from oil or coal, let's say, to make a solar cell or a wind, just a windmill, right? And then you can say, okay, well, that windmill is going to give me that much energy. Well, it's not going to give you as much energy as oil. So you need another windmill and another windmill and another, and you have a whole bunch of them, like these windmill farms, and they still can't produce as much energy as oil and coal. It's a transition we need to do. And then, yes, at some point we probably will run out of oil. But in the next 30, 40 years, the petroleum industry is not going away anytime soon. It's going to be a while. So that's kind of where we went down that rabbit hole, and we're going down that rabbit hole right now. See that?
It's my fault.
That's okay. That's okay.
So, your father was very devout Muslim.
Yes.
He was very committed to
Yes.
the tradition of Islam. Your mom was a lot more moderate.
Yes.
Did the best she can.
Yes.
And I, grew up in Saudi Arabia. My parents were not very religious. They did not really follow the religious structure per se. They were just obliging because Saudi Arabia was very much orientated in that way. But I consider myself very, very spiritual, and I do draw strength from the divine. And when I get stuck and I can't find an answer, I turn to prayer and hope, and you hear me all the time, and hoping that the divine will reach down and pull me out of whatever pickle I am in. So, how, I know you went to Arabic school on the weekend. It was important for your dad to plant that faith, beliefs, and values of the Islamic culture as an Arab. What was going through your mind at that time as far as your relationship with organized religion and structured religion? Now, as a scientist, very renowned scientist, he achieved so much. I would love for the listeners to hear your perspective of the divine and your understanding of it.
So, like you said, again, only my years in Jersey City is when I went to Arabic school and Islamic studies, and I go on the weekends during the school year, and then in the summertime I'd go 5 days, Monday through Friday, every week. So I had really no summers off, to be honest with you. I just was like either in an English school, American school, or I was in this Arabic Islamic school. And I to be honest with you, I hated it, and the reason why is I was being forced to do it. And thinking back, I wish I took more in, absorbed more. And I absorbed as much as I could, but I didn't want to be there because, I wanted to have summers off, and I didn't. A lot of kids want to you went on vacations in the summer, but I didn't. I had to go through school, and it was just it's what it turned me off towards the religion part of it, and even in the Arabic part of it. I spoke Arabic fluently with my parents, but the reading and writing was where you learn that in the school. I just didn't want to do it, and it was not something like fun. Like if I had my mindset right now and I put it in my younger self, I would have sucked it up so much, and absorbed it. It would have been amazing. But again, you're a kid, you're
fascinating now, because when you have, to my surprise, you had a lot of inquisitive questions about the history of Islam, because I learned it in Saudi Arabia, and for somebody that is so inquisitive about it and very fascinated by it, I'm surprised you weren't into it, but probably because the setting was not as interesting or as exciting as you want to be. Now you're traveling the world, and you appreciate it, you embrace it a lot more than even when I met you when you were like 20 years old.
I'll tell you, when I met you, I think when I met you and your brothers, it was like, telling me all the stories from Saudi and what you learned and school and the religion. It started. That's how I believe is where it kind of started clicking in my head. Like, wow, this is really, really neat. And I sat and I listened to the stories of the prophet or some stories you tell me about Jesus and how kind of we see Jesus in our religion. And I was like, this is really, really neat. I wish I could sit here and just learn this all, and you guys teach me, and we would be there for years probably. But ended up that I think that's kind of where I reignited back to when I was young. And I didn't want to do it. And I'm like, oh, now I want to do it. I want to listen, but I don't have the time. We're going to sit there and teach a class with, like a professor. I mean, we're telling stories, as we're sitting there having some tea or coffee. So, but yeah, it was, that's where it reignited me, I believe, in the faith.
No, I know. I agree with you 100%. So your teachers, where they had a specific belief system that really constituted the way they conducted themselves, and the way they taught you, right? Yeah. So now thinking, we have a friend's son, he's doing Arabic and religion.
Yes. Yeah.
He's having so much fun. He's loving it because the teachers are a lot more modern. They make it fun, and even
My teachers were not fun. They were not modern. Back when I was like, if I'll never forget. Like I wasn't interested in the subject matter, so I have some homework and I come in and I couldn't do it, and the guy would have me put my hands out and he'd slap my hands with a ruler.
Yeah.
And so negative reinforcement, right? Not positive reinforcement. So, which is something that, you think about, it's like, I learned in life, all my life, that positive reinforcement is what really gets a result. And negative reinforcement does not give results anywhere. And I'm talking about like when I was young doing the religion in Arabic, all the way to when I was working in the semiconductor industry, and I was teaching people how to do Sims, and I'd watch other colleagues teach them, these newcomers how to do Sims or any kind of scientific instrument, and they were doing negative reinforcement and how they were teaching them, and that is one of the things I learned in life early, that and I'm talking about from when I was in Arabic and Islamic school, that negative reinforcement doesn't work. And even my dad had some negative reinforcement. He was very strict, and he was very heavy-handed, I'd say. And it's the way it was for him when he was younger. I know my grandfather was like that too. So he was very militant about, teaching. And if I didn't understand it, well, that's my fault. And, I should learn it, whether it be math or science or whatever it might be. But, and I really think the positive reinforcement, and this is why chemistry, I believe, rings true to me, is that Mr. Davis was very positive and made chemistry fun. And it's really weird to say that. A lot of people think that, well, chemistry, how's it fun? But he made it fun, enjoyable. He'd laugh and joke, and the chemistry problems he give you were just like enjoyable. And then he would, and we'd have lab as well. and he would do things where he would teach us something in the lecture, and then he would do it in front of you in the lab. Like, you take a certain material and you'd light it, it would light up a certain color, and that's because of just electron transitions, things like that. He would just explain it in lecture, and he'd do it, and it's like, wow, that's so cool that it's actually happening right in front of me. So that's kind of what that's that positive reinforcement, and that's where I kind of learned it. I think I learned that in high school, and I carried that through college, and then graduate school, and obviously when I started working, and that's how I would teach people, is what Mr. Davis, how he taught me. It stuck, So even when I went to classes in chemistry in college, and the professor was just dry, I was like, oh, it's okay. I'm just gonna read it myself, and I'm gonna enjoy it, because I enjoyed it for the 2 years I took it in high school, and it just kept on propagating. And I did have, actually, I'll say, Dr. Ocasio. I forgot about Dr. Ocasio. He was my general chemistry professor in Case Western. I think he was your general chemistry professor too, right, Dr. Ocasio? Great guy, and his class was fun. He had the same mindset as Mr. Davis, but now he's teaching older students, right? And teaching like higher level chemistry, but teaching in a way that had that same, he had the same mindset, I would say, as Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis is teaching high school kids, and he's teaching college kids, right? And it's the mindset and how they present to these students is where it really rings true in your head and goes, wow, even the kids, I'll never, students that didn't like chemistry were still interested with Dr. Ocasio. It was really neat to watch. So there were other professors that did general chemistry. Everybody wanted to be with Dr. Ocasio. So if you're with another professor in general chemistry, the passing rate with Dr. Ocasio is much higher than these other professors. So,
well, I'm not sure how much more time do we have. I don't know. I can't tell, but I would like to touch on Egypt.
Sure. Yeah.
Living here as an immigrant away from your home world into the new world. And unfortunately, both of your parents have passed. Allah yarhamhum, may they peace. You were the only child. And as we know that it's as we get older, it's harder to make new friends. So last time you were in Egypt, it was 40 years ago, and we just got back from Egypt. And can you really quick summarize the difference in the experiences between the two, being a 14-year-old and then a 55-year-old? So
here's the cool thing. We just discussed this. It was really neat. I want to bring this into the perspective and the discussion here. The last time I went, I was in high school, and I want to say my freshman year. And if you remember, I was discussing how I didn't like Arabic class and Islamic class. That's the mindset I had going in, right? So in that mindset back then, I was a kid, right? So I remembered some of the big things you see, like the pyramids. I remember visiting my grandmother on the farm and trying to milk a cow, which didn't work. It was a disaster. The cow didn't like it either. I remembered my uncles back then, a little bit, but over the years you forget Egypt. The only Egypt you remember is if you saw a photo, or my parents would talk about it, that because they had gone, while I was, an adult. They'd gone a couple times, and they come back and say, Egypt has changed. It's not the way it was before. And I'm like, okay, I don't remember except these couple of big things that happened when I was in high school when we went. And when I got to Egypt this time, it was an experience I cannot explain. It's almost like I felt like I went on a pilgrimage, and it opened my eyes to a world, of family, culture, society, and just camaraderie between people that I never saw that here in the United States, except when I'm with, the short times I'm with some of my best friends, like Rick, for instance, from high school. We still have that kind of connection, but the friends we have here, you got to dinner with them, great people, love them. And then you go home and you're like, oh, it's me and Slava now. And the friendship is not the same as what the feeling I got when I got there in Egypt. And not just the family, it's just, you're sitting there and you're spending time. And I remember Slava, there was a gentleman, and we were sitting at this coffee shop. We were waiting for my cousins to come and see us. And he handed you, you were saying hello to the little kid, and he brought the baby over, or the little toddler over, and handed her to you. That would never happen in the United States. Somebody handing you their child that you've never seen before. It would never happen here. And then, he played with her, and then he brought an infant over, I believe, if I remember correctly. And the guy was so, like, I don't know, like, he almost was like, take them. It's as if they're yours, right? Yeah. And so it was a real neat kind of experience that I'd never seen before, except when, we're here with family members or friends that say, oh, they just had a baby. Here you go. You want to hold a baby? Sure. But this is somebody you never met. We have our friends here. They'll do it. But it's just an experience. And then the wait staff at the restaurants and the people at the hotels, it was, they're not being nice because of their pay. To be honest with you, I'm going to be very honest here. It's not like they're paid like a lot of money there. They're not paid much, but they're nice because it's in the culture, it's in the blood. And that's something I not only saw, I felt. You feel it. It's a feeling you get. So, like, when I was leaving, I'm like, man, I don't really want to leave here. This is something like I really feel at home for the first time in a long time since my parents passed away. And of course, I'm at home with you. Obviously, we're married and everything. But it's that family, like extended family that you and I don't have here. We don't have this family. Mm-hmm. And my cousins, it was weird. My cousins, my uncle, their spouses, even, it was like I'd known them forever. Like I like as if they were living with me here in the United States, and I'm visiting them every week. Is what it felt like when, within a day or two, everything started just to click. And even seeing my uncle the first time, we did FaceTime with him for a year prior to going in December. But when I saw him at the airport, it was like, whoa, that's my dad. Whoa, like you see him, like, you're coming out of the airport, and in Egypt, it's like these floodgates open, these doors open, everybody's coming out, out of the customs and stuff. Just custom immigration, you're coming out, and just floods of people, and then you have tons of people standing there. And as you come out, you're trying to look for your family members, kind of. And the first person I laid eyes on was my uncle, and it was like, it was easy to, right? It was easy to see who he was, right? Yeah. And then as soon as I saw him, then I saw my cousins. They were, around, coming in. So, but yeah, it was like, whoa. But yeah, that feeling of family, which is a feeling I don't think I had here, except for my small family with you and my parents and my cousins and Maryland. But again, when I was there, it's like my cousin would visit my uncle often, and my other cousin would visit my uncle as well, and he would visit them in their homes and spend time with them. And that's in the 2 weeks I was there, and from what I heard from them, it happens often, and it's that you're looking at it and it's like, wow, you're taking care of your elders, but they're also taking care of you. People forget that because they're older, meaning like, oh, you got to help them with the things but they help you with their wisdom and what they learned and their stories. Yeah.
They take care of you emotionally, spiritually. So,
yeah.
Affirmation. That's a support group. So would it be fair to say that you have experienced that traditional tribal connection as a tribe, as a support tribe when you got there? And that's one of the things, unfortunately, that we pay a very, very high price for when we leave our home world into the new world, unless you drag everybody back with you. So that leads us to the last point, which I would like to ask you if you can share with our listeners.
Sure.
As you know, this is a lot of people in Egypt are, as we just talked about this morning. So if anybody from the old world is interested in leaving, migrating, immigrating, for life, better resources, what would now Ihab, as the entrepreneur, the PhD, the walk through life, what would be the advice that you would give them?
So, lessons I learned in life, the many lessons, schooling, my parents, being with you and your brothers, and visiting Egypt. And if somebody would come to me and, somebody who's in their 20s or whatever, and I met them in Egypt and they want to come to the United States, and they really are just thinking, wow, the United States is this amazing place, and it is. I would tell them, keep the connection with the old world. And I'm not talking about old world like it's an old place. It's the old world, meaning it's your roots. Keep your roots with you. Even take some of those roots and plant them here in the United States, because it's what is going to connect you to the world, to this earth, and to your family. And that is what I learned. That family is number one, right? And I never thought that when I was young. I'm like, oh, I'm going to go out with my friends and, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you never think that way.
No, well, now I'm older and I look back and I go, wow, after this 2 weeks I spent, I'm like, I feel like I should have done this sooner. And, how much time do I have left on this earth? I don't know. But, I'm going to make the best of it. And I'm going to visit as often as I can Egypt. And I'm going to lay some roots down there at some point very soon. I'd like to get an apartment there. And so I can visit often because, we're getting close to our retirement years, right? And, I'm still going to work, but I think that, that going there and spending a little more time there would be something that would not only feel good, it heals the soul, I would say, so I would give those youngsters that, or not even if they're not young, they don't have to be young, keep that connection. And it's good to have both worlds together. That combination is a good thing. But never lose the world that you come from, because that's your identity as well as the new world. You'll create an identity here. So you'll be unique. Yeah,
my dad told me that never, ever, ever, ever forget where you came from. Yeah. And we have mentioned in previous episodes that we are in the advantage of having that hybrid culture in us.
Yeah.
We build or regain the multicultural adaptability, and that's a beautiful thing. We're really young, we want to be or this or that. I want to be American, or I want to be old-fashioned. Now we learn that it is a good thing to be both, and if you can just remove or within, I am an American and I am an Egyptian, I am a Jordanian, and that's a huge advantage. But the world right now is ready for that. The world is a lot more tolerant to that. The world is a lot more ready to embrace people that, multi-language, multicultural, and then because the world is connected more than ever, and the world is such a small world right now, especially with all the technology that can reach out, live with people, and talk to people 100%. It sounds like Egypt put things into perspective for you, Ihab.
Yes, it put things into perspective, and it was life-changing.
Yeah.
I'd say that. I would say that would be the really big thing. It was just life-changing, and I do miss everybody there, and I can't wait to go back. So, we'll kind of figure out our next trip at some point. But again, when somebody comes here, keep that Egypt inside you, and be happy as you are in Egypt, and kind as you are in Egypt, even though the people here sometimes are not as kind to you. Don't lose your identity. Don't lose who you are. And it's something that I learned from my parents, that not to lose who I am. So I was always, even though I didn't visit Egypt, that part of my life with my parents, of them telling me, don't lose your identity, be somebody unique. And my mom would always tell me, don't get upset at things. It's okay. Things happen. You just got to let that go and move on to the next thing. And that's kind of how I move through life a little bit. So.
And we tend to create our belief system as a combination. We pick what we like from our parents, a little bit from
Yes.
So, and I see that in you a lot. Yeah. Analytical mathematics and the thirst for justice. You're always about what's right, what's civil, and that's that your mom too. But the spinning a positive on everything that comes. Your dad was very. Don't get me wrong. I loved him. Allah yarhamu. But he was very cynical about things. He's just like, it was very cautious. Your mom was like, happy-go-lucky, let's just do this. And the best kind of thing. So
exactly.
The social butterfly, which you are, she was funny. You got her sense of humor. So it's fascinating how we adapt and we pick what serves us from each parent, and that becomes your own belief system, because like I said, it will constitute the way we conduct ourselves. And I see you conducting yourself on a daily basis as an outsider, as an observant, that sometimes there goes we have. So you switch forth, and because you're the only child, I have nothing to compare it to. You don't have a sibling, either or, because they say the gene gets severed and it will split even to more of the little pieces of your parents among the siblings. Thank you so much for your time. That was, I never get tired of hearing about these stories, because I get to relive your parents, and you know how dear they are. They were.
Absolutely.
Allah yarhamhum ihsan ilayhum. So, guys, thank you so much. We are reaching the end of the hour. Thank you, Ihab, so much for making the time. I know how busy you are, and typically Monday is your admin day on emails and calls and stuff. And I'm sure we're gonna get a lot of likes on this one, and I'm sure you're gonna end up coming back to the space to share even more stories. And more laughs and more memories with us. So thank you, everybody, for listening to our episode and joining us today. And I just want to remind you guys that our podcast is available on Spotify and Apple and on YouTube. It's available for you even as a video for you guys to watch and also listen wherever you are, whenever you are. And please, please, for the sake of humanity, continue telling your story, because that's what helps us learn, and that's just one of the many, many tools we communicate with each other. And if you have enjoyed this, please like and share so we can get inspired and get motivated and get encouraged to push even more stories.
Yeah.
Hopefully you guys get inspired and learn from this. So thank you so much for listening, and see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.